Hello everyone, my name is Karina and I am making this video since I've had a very strange and crazy experience, and I have quite a few friends that live abroad and don't speak Spanish, so I've prepared this video so that I could send it to them, because I've already made 2 videos in Spanish for the friends that I couldn't see here, because a lot of my friends have moved from the city and I have moved also from the city, so it's very unlikely that I will be able to get to see them all, and especially if people are in different countries now. So I'm preparing this video because I want to share an experience I had, and I think it contains a lot of valuable information that I think it's worth sharing. So maybe some of you know, I know a few of you know, that my father, 6 months ago, joined a cult and a sect that believed in the end of time, and that that end of time was very, very close, and they had to prepare and go up into the mountain and start living there to make sure they survived, so that they would help the ones who were going to survive the world catastrophe. So the point with this was that when my dad called me up, well, I think I called him or he called me, I can't remember, but when he gave me the news that he was that he had quit his job, he was going to up and live in the mountain in a container with another 3 people and filled with food, I was like, okay, this is this is definitely not okay. I need to go help. So I grabbed my backpack and I went to see him up in the mountain. I got all the way there, and I had packed a bag to stay like for a month, you know, and I got there and I couldn't handle it for more than 24 hours. Like the following day, exactly around the same time that I had arrived, I was departing. I had called my mother so that she could come pick me up. And the reason why was because the woman that was leading the sect or the cult, I'm not super certain on what's the best expression for this in English, but the woman that was leading the cult said or claimed that she had direct access to the word of God, meaning that whatever word, when they were praying, whatever word that was coming out of her mouth was not actually hers but God's. So whenever they prayed, which was 3 times a day back then, I had to leave the space because I was not allowed to be in the same place where they were doing the prayer. So I would come out, and this is when I felt, I already knew that something really dark was happening, you know, but I had an intuition. But this is when everything got confirmed, and I went outside and they started doing their prayer. And I could see, not with my physical eyes, but with almost like the eyes of the heart, I could see these shadows from the earth, you know, entering the space where they were doing the prayers. And then when they all came out, my dad looked like he was drunk, you know, like he was, and I could feel like stuff had gotten into him. And the whole thing was so creepy, not because of what I was thinking about it, but because of the vibration of the whole thing, you know, like the whole thing was creepy. It was very creepy. So, and I was very scared. And so then I realized that this woman was indeed in contact with a spirit, but it was not the spirit of God, you know, it was a bad spirit. It was a fallen angel. As we've heard in stories, which are true, and I will explain this further, but fallen angels do exist. Satan does exist. I didn't believe in any of this before. I was baptized as a Catholic, and I had all of the sacraments, except obviously the consecrated life and marriage. But I quit. You know, I left the church when I was about 14 years old, and it's not like I made it public or anything. I just stopped believing, you know. like I can imagine that most young people do, And I started wondering and trying to find my own expression of faith, because I was always a very spiritual person, but I just started looking spirituality elsewhere. And that took me everywhere. And I ended up being baptized as a Buddhist when 7 months before all of this happened. That's to have like an idea and a context of where all of this is coming from, like where I was in my life when all of this started happening. And the thing was that in that time I didn't believe in this, like in fallen angels or anything like that. But what this experience has given me is almost like a vision. Again, not with my eyes, almost like a heart vision. In Spanish, there's a term for this, which I didn't even know that existed, which is called infused knowledge, which means it doesn't come through your head or your intellect. Is knowledge that is almost like printed directly to your heart. And what I've gathered with all of this is almost like the story of creation, and it was very strange for me to see it. But at this point of the story, I was just really terrified. I was terrified because I was very concerned about the health of my father's health, both physically and spiritually, mentally, of course, also. But more than anything, I was really concerned about his soul. I did have the concept of a soul back then. That never went away, despite the fact that I was baptized a Buddhist. I always believed in God anyway, But I thought that they had a Buddha, which is actually, they do have just one Buddha that is outside of time and space. And I always kind of thought that Buddhists didn't know that Buddha was actually God. But so it was funny for me. It was almost like an inner joke. But I had the belief of a soul, of something that is eternal in us, and the mortality of our bodies, but not the mortality of that part of us. So I was extremely concerned about my dad's soul. I thought he was losing his soul, and he couldn't, because that was very dangerous. So I was just super concerned, and I was in such a degree of anguish and pain that when my mom came to pick me up, all I was able and capable of doing when I arrived into her home was to pray the rosary. And this was shocking, and it was like I was gobsmacked at the fact that I was doing this, because the only time I had done this previously was probably when I was like 12 years old, and I had received my first communion, and I never did anything with it afterwards. So it was such a strange reaction, and it wasn't a reaction that came from my mind. It was a reaction that came from my soul, came from the deepest part of me. And it was like, we need to pray the rosary. So I started praying the rosary like a mad person, like seriously like a mad person. When I say mad person, I mean there was one day where I prayed 11 rosaries in a day, and for you guys that have maybe prayed one, know that it takes about 30 to 40 minutes to pray one of those. So that's a lot of time to be praying a rosary, So I was desperate. I was absolutely desperate. I was in despair and anguish. I couldn't talk to my dad. He had it had been prohibited for him to use his phone for a couple of days, and I didn't know how long that was going to last, and it was just horrible. It was horrible. I want to thank the people abroad that actually prayed for my father, my friend Sarah and Lance, her father, and Donna, her mother, because I know that he was in their prayers all along. And so I was desperate. I was just feeling so desperate that I kept on praying every single day. I will get up and I start praying the rosary, and like I will pray the rosary while I was like playing with the beads, and when I was walking down my street to go catch the bus, and then on the bus, and then on classes, and everywhere I could, like the only time that I would stop would be whenever I would encounter someone in the street or talk on the phone or be with my partner, and that was it. So I just prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and my whole life became a constant prayer. And this went on for 3 months. Of course, in all this time, what I'm doing is like I was praying for my dad, I'm praying for my father. But at month number 3, something strange started to happen to me. Those of you who know me, on the year 2014, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, type number 1, I think it is. Yes, or 2, type 2. Can't remember right now, but the one that has psychotic events. I had 3 psychotic episodes, ranging from, going from 2014 and in between 2014 and 2016, I had 3 psychotic episodes. And the thing was that on month number 3 of praying, things started to happen to me. And what started to happen to me was that I started feeling the exact same feelings and the exact same thoughts and the exact same mood and the exact same physical signs of a psychotic episode. But the difference of this time was that I had a weapon. I had a weapon, and that weapon was the rosary. So whenever all these feelings were start creeping in, because those of you who know me maybe remember the quality of the episodes that I had, it was always the fight or the battle between good and evil, and all of these things that will come to my head. And so I will get the feelings, I will get this oppression, and I will get this uncomfortableness, and not sure if that's even a word, but I would get all this, and I would start praying the rosary, and when I would finish the rosary, it would go away, and it would leave me alone and in peace for like 2 hours, and then it will come back, and I will do the same, and it will go away. This started happening. It lasted about a month, but it started peaking, it started just really going up in intensity, frequency, until the point where it became a true battle. Like I was battling with the rosary. And it started getting very heavy because what was happening, I will tell you now, but the spirit that I had inside, yes, evil spirit, started making me believe or threaten me, with all my body, because since it was inside, it could do this, to make me believe that if I finished praying the rosary that I was praying to make it go away, halfway through, it would start making me believe that if I finished it, I was going to have a heart attack. And it was super real, it was like extremely real, so I had to fight it off, and it was very difficult because nobody wants to die, neither do I. So I was very terrified to do all of this. It was excruciatingly painful on a spiritual level, and I would continue to do so and continue to do so, and then it just hit a point where I felt like I was going crazy. Like I didn't have many people around at that time, so it was easy to almost like pretend that everything was normal, because my partner was coming in and out because he was doing some trips, so he was not constantly at the house, and also because since I was praying, I had already like memorized the whole rosary, so since I was praying constantly, I could almost like keep it in control, certain control. But then this started like really going crazy. I felt like I was definitely going mad, and that I couldn't take it anymore, because if I took any more of it, I was seriously not come back to sanity. and I was in despair. It was just really, really excruciatingly anguishing, and I didn't know what to do. And suddenly, out of the blue, I got this feeling in my heart that what I needed to do was to go to Mass. And this is me talking, like I was a Buddhist, and I attended Masses on funerals and weddings, and maybe in intervals, like after the second episode, maybe I've gone to some of those. But that was it. There was never something constant. It was never something out of true belief, it was just very sporadic, So I just felt it in my heart, and I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. I need to go to Mass. So I did. I went to Mass, and what happened in Mass started changing my life. I was in Mass, and at the moment where the priest, I'm talking Catholic Church, when the priest starts consecrating the Eucharist, and he holds it up, I went bonkers. Not me. What was inside of me went bonkers. Like, it just started screaming, started saying blasphemy, and also saying that the priest was how do you call it, like haunted or cursed. Yes, that the priest was cursed, and that what he was holding was not coming from God, and that it was coming from the devil, and that if I took it, it was going to be poison for me and for my body. And I so desperately wanted to get up and go receive the Eucharist. Like, my soul was in desperate need of doing that, and I couldn't do it because my body wouldn't move. And this lasted a week. I was going to Mass every day to try to receive the Eucharist, and I couldn't do it because my body would freeze completely, totally frozen, and I wouldn't be able to move, get up, and go to do what I needed to do. And it was suffocating. I realized I was not in control of my whole functions of my whole body, and that I was truly having a spiritual battle with what I was starting to intuitively think that was a demon, because it was there was aversion to the sacred. And this would have never come out if I hadn't started praying, because I remember I went to other Masses, like I said before, like funerals and weddings, and nothing happened to me, So I think it was definitely propitiated by all the prayer that I was doing, And what happened was that I started going insane. Like, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't concentrate on anything else that wasn't praying, because the intensity of the panic and the fear that this creature could infuse in me was so high that there was nothing I could do except for prayer to make it go away. And I am in this desperate state, just completely lost, feeling absolutely helpless. And in that horrible state, again, I felt in my heart that what I could do was to just open the Bible. And I did. I just opened the Bible. And when I opened the Bible, I read exactly this piece where two of Jesus' disciples are coming back to him and saying, "Master, we were not able to remove this demon, and we don't know why." And he looks at them and says, "Oh, don't worry. It's because this kind of demon only comes out with a lot of prayer and fast." And I was like, oh my God, that's what I need to do. I need to fast. And so I did. I let my partner know that I was going to be locked in my room all day, and that I was not going to eat. He wasn't very concerned about it, because I used to meditate a whole bunch. So like, I would be like meditating half of the day. So it wasn't weird for him when I was like, I need my own retreat, like I'm going to be meditating all day, because at this point I felt embarrassed to say that actually what I was doing was praying, So I said I was going to be meditating for the entire day. and that I will come out whenever I was ready, and that he shouldn't worry about my meals because I was going to be fasting. And the war began. Oh my goodness. I cannot put into words what that day was like. I hope I can convey the feelings and emotions as close as what they were, but actually hopefully not, because I don't want to terrify you. So just, I locked the door and I started praying, and I do not know how many rosaries I did that day, but I just didn't stop. It just was one after the other, one after the other, and one after the other, and one after the other. And what ended up happening is that at the end of the day, it was close to sunset time over here. I was on the toilet floor, because there's a toilet in the room, in the toilet right next to it, and I was on the toilet's floor, on my knees, like on prayer position, and I had just finished the one rosary, and I was going to start with the following one, and I felt a hand that was pushing my head forward. I had no idea what was going on, and it was pushing my head forward so that my forehead will actually touch the ground. So I ended up like a Muslim, like Muslims pray, exactly in that position, because I was already on my knees. So I just went forward, and at the moment, at this point, I was almost crying of panic and fear, because at this point I was already like hearing doors slamming doors, like really, really big, powerful sounds. Everything was going super dark, and when I say dark, I don't mean absence of light. I mean absence of love. It's just getting darker and darker, and things are getting like really perverse, like very feelings of evil that I have never felt in my life. So I'm like in terror. And later I found out that, because now it makes sense, whilst all of this was happening, I had no idea what was happening. But then when I look at it in retrospective, now that I've studied more of the subject and that I've had 2 exorcisms on me already, I know what it is, and I can tell that hand, that heavenly hand, was my guardian angel. He put me in prostration position so that I could finish the prayer that I was doing. And when that happened, when my forehead touched the ground, this beast was not happy. Like, it could maybe anticipate or kind of like understand what was happening or what was going to happen. I didn't, but he did, or it did, because it started raging against me in a way I would never forget. It was the darkest place I've ever been. I've never felt so much. It was sheer panic. It was terror. It was undescribable by human words. And for one fraction of a second, I visited hell. I didn't have an experience of a direct encounter with God. I had a direct encounter with hell, which led me to God. And when I was there, thank goodness it was not longer than it was, because my heart would have exploded out of just sheer terror, because it was absolutely horrible. Hell is absolutely horrible. We don't want to be there, not for just one split second. And if I would have stayed there for any longer, I am positive I would have died. Like, my heart would have not been able to take it. It's terrifying. It's a place where I couldn't see it with my eyes, my physical eyes. I could see it with my heart. And it was a place where there's absolutely not one drop of love. Just none. Absolutely none. And everything around is perversion. And when I say perversion, I mean like truly like the most perverse thing that you could think of elevated to 10,000. And that was all around me. And this thing interfered with my speech, because all this time that I had been praying the entire day, I had been praying the rosary out loud, right? So I was praying when my forehead touched the ground, and all of this started happening because the beast kind of like anticipated what was going on, or it wasn't happy that I was in that position. It went straight to, moved and went straight to impede my speech. So this last rosary, I didn't know it was going to be the last, but this last rosary was the slowest and most painful rosary I've ever prayed, because it was just, I don't know how you pray the Lord's Prayer, I do know in English. It was like, Our Father, because I was struggling with being able to speak, so it was super long and very difficult and painful to say it. So I don't know how long it took me to end that whole rosary. Plus, I am in this like Muslim position, so I feel like I'm starting to suffocate, because my head is on the ground and everything around me is like darker and darker every time. Again, that absence of light. And I feel like I'm starting to, I'm lacking air. And I know that I can't leave that position. I know I can't make any mistakes with the counts, on the rosary. And I know I need to finish it. And I know it desperately, because I'm being attacked. Not only psychologically, but spiritually and physically. So it was the worst time of my life. I don't know how long this took, but at the time I finished praying the rosary, the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. And I am in this position, right? And I am right about to finish that rosary, and I start feeling like the skin of my back was lifting up. Was being lifted, it was just lifting up. It was a sensation, of course, because actually it wasn't happening physically, but the sensation that I had was this: my skin was lifting up, and when it started lifting up, this beast came out of my back and occupied the whole space of the toilet, and it felt like it was just as big as my house. My house is 3 stories high. And it just felt like it was that big, and it had wings, just like these type of dinosaurs, that look like gargoyles, but they're not, It was like that. It was exactly like that. And thank God I did not see it, because I could feel it, I could sense it, and that was enough. And at the moment, this was all very quick, when the skin started lifting up, and then this thing comes up. And then I felt like it whipped me, it had whipped on his 2 hands, and it did this motion. I felt it. I felt how it dropped all the way from here on the sides of my back and my legs all the way to my foot, my feet both. And for 2 weeks I walked around feeling like I had my skin, like all of my flesh, open. Of course, it wasn't the case, because I could see I had no marks of it all. So I knew that it had happened, but spiritually speaking, not in my body, not in my physical body. And then when that happened, now that I look back on it, I know that of course it did come out, But at this point, I was so upset and so on the verge of madness that I wasn't sure if this thing had come out. I never had any experience of this, ever and at all. I grew up in a Catholic family, but we never spoke. My parents never spoke to me about hell. They never spoke to me about demons. I never had any classes where that was a subject, we all spoke only. I was always taught about the good things, like the good sides and the angels, but I never heard about demons or hell or any of these stuff. So I was like, I was very, very, very frightened. I was terrified. Frightened is not the word. I was terrified, and even more than terrified. So I really didn't know if this thing had come out of my body or not, and I needed to be sure. So I'm there in the toilet, and I remember that my mother a couple of years ago had introduced me to the only exorcist in Chile, that happens to be her friend, and I was like, oh my God, that's what I need to do. I need to go see him. And she had told me that he had been transferred from one place in Rancagua to a different town a little bit further down south that is called San Vicente de Tahuatahua. So I was in the toilet, and I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. I need to go see him because I don't know if this is out. I need him to take him out, like get him out of me, because it's just hurting me, and I'm done. Like I don't ever want to feel anything like this ever again. I need help. So I come out of the room, and this is a very strange, almost comical thing. It wasn't at the time, of course, but me looking at it in retrospective, I can see the humor in it, and now I can laugh about this stuff, but I wasn't able to laugh about it until very recently. And I come out of the room, and my partner is on the other room on his desk, and he kind of like sticks his head out and says, hey, are you done? Florcita, he calls me, which is a little flower. And I call him little sun, like Solcito. So I say, yes, Solcito, I'm done. And he's like, wow, your meditation must have been really, really deep, because there was just right now, not too long ago, I felt like you had disappeared. Like you had just gone so tiny, that you, boop, at one point, I just didn't feel your energy in the house at all. And I was like, I didn't explain to him at that time, of course, because at this point I hadn't told anybody what I was going through, because being me, in the sense that I had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I had been hospitalized 3 times. If I told anybody, like my partner, my mom, my dad, anyone, well, not my dad because he was gone, but anyone that knew me and loved me, if I told them that I was perceiving and seeing and just feeling all these things, they were going to grab me and take me to the hospital. And I knew that this battle was not a mental thing. It was a spiritual thing. Otherwise, why would I be kind of like making it work by praying the rosary? Like it just didn't make any sense. So at least I knew that. I knew that I needed to keep it a secret, because otherwise I was going to end up in the hospital. And in the hospital, the first thing that they do is that they put you on the sedatives, and then I wouldn't be able to pray. And I knew that prayer was the only thing that was keeping this monster away from me. Well, not away because he was inside, but you know what I mean. Not able to interfere as much in my head. Let's put it that way. And the thing was that, so I know exactly what that time was. And the time that Felipe was describing, where he felt that I had left the house, was that one fraction of a second where I was in hell. Because I wasn't in the house. My soul wasn't. My soul traveled and then went to this horrible place. And the only thing that I realized when I was there, it was that no one was to ever be there. It's the most horrible and excruciatingly agonizing feeling that you could ever imagine. The body is not capable of sustaining it because it's a state of the soul. And on top of that, it is indeed eternal. I was there and I knew it was forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and it wasn't going to stop. And so it made sense, it made sense to me when Felipe said that as soon as I got out of the room. The following day he had to go to Santiago very early in the morning for a tour, and I had already made plans. I didn't tell him, of course, that I was going to go see an exorcist. I was taking advantage of the fact that he was not going to be home, and so that I could go and just grab a bus and travel and go see The Exorcist. That sounded like the movie. But what happened during the night is that I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep at all because I was being presented with this particular image, like a vision, again, not with my eyes, where of this particular place that I have never seen in my life. I mean, I had never gone to San Vicente de Tahuatahua, and it was almost like a threat, because it was this image of this particular place, and the whole message of this vision was that if I went to this place, I was going to encounter a pack of wild dogs that were going to eat me alive at that particular place. You can imagine I didn't sleep. Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh, can you imagine the amount of horror that I was feeling at that time? Because I knew I had to go, and the reason why is because I already knew. I had almost like the not the intuition, like the knowledge that this thing was a demon, and that if I had a demon inside of me and I died, you don't need to wonder where you're going, like your soul is not alone. If you need any amount of light or energy or whatever to ascend, I wasn't going to, because it was going to drag me down with it. So I was thinking that I had already visited for just like one split of a second hell. So in my mind, all I could think was, fine, if the dogs have to eat me alive, I prefer it to happen once and for it to be done than to go to hell and for it to happen over and over again, and being over and over eaten by a pack of wild dogs over and 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 over again. I'm like, nah, sorry, like that's not gonna happen. So I used that frame of mind and this thoughts with the weakness that I had to make myself a little bit braver, like to just have the courage to grab the bus in the morning, because I needed to do so. And it was horrible. It was the longest night that I've ever experienced in my life. It was horrible. And the following day, very early in the morning, it was still dark, I remember, and Felipe just left the house. And as soon as he went out the gate, I got up and I started getting ready to go. And I remember that I was picking my shoes, and I had it was cold, it was in the middle of the winter, and I am thin, and I hadn't eaten anything the previous day, and I wasn't going to until I talked to him. So I was really cold, I was shivering, and so I was putting layers of clothes on me to be able to go. And I was picking my shoes, and I have some really thick winter shoes, and instead of wearing those, I decided to wear a really thin pair of shoes. And the only reason why I decided to do that is because I was thinking about my family. I was thinking about to not leave anything behind. I was thinking about these dogs. I was thinking about these dogs eating me, and I wanted for them to eat everything. I didn't want a trace of me anywhere, because if this is how I was going to die, I didn't want my family to know how I died. Actually, I didn't take my phone. I didn't take my ID. I only took the money that I needed for the bus, and that was it. So this was the mood. I was, like going to catch the bus. I think that I don't know. I didn't look at myself in the mirrors. I have no idea what my face looked like, but it must have been like the most depressed face that I have ever had in my face, like expression that I've had in my face. But anyway, I went and I grabbed the bus, and we're arriving to San Vicente de Tahuatahua, like entering the small, this turning around on the side, on the highway, and starting to go inward to this town. And in the middle of that, right into my right, I look, because I'm looking at the countryside, and I look and I see the place. I see the place that I've been presented in the vision all night long, and I was like, oh my god! I cannot describe how I really felt like I was going to die. Like I was convinced I was going to die, and it was horrible. And the bus went on, and I was like, okay, I need to be brave. I need to go talk to him. Everything's gonna be fine. And if I die, well, I die. You know, like you need to be brave. I was encouraging myself the best I could. And I got to the church, and I got to where he lived, you know, behind the church, and I managed to talk to him. And I talked to him, and I told him everything that I've told you so far. And he looked at me, and he was like, "Yep, I understand. I actually, everything that you say kind of like matches with the experiences that I've had, because at this point, when I was going to mass, this thing, you know, this spirit was biting into my liver whenever I was doing things that it did not like. You know, it was, I could feel that it was staying, you know, in my liver. My liver felt feverish, and it was a little bit swollen. And at any time that I would do something that it did not like going to mass, like trying to receive the Eucharist, like doing something good for someone in the street, it will bite on my liver, bite into it, you know. It was really painful, and I told him that, and I told him everything else, and he was like, yeah, it's all well and good, you know, like it really sounds like something that we would be needing to explore together, but, and that was a big but, you've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and therefore I work with a group, you know, like a crew of physicians and doctors, Catholic doctors, you know, like a Catholic psychiatrist and Catholic psychologist. Yes, because my psychiatrist and my psychologist were not Catholic, or not that I know of. And he said, so I will give you a list of 5 different psychiatrists. You can pick from the list whomever you feel like, and you need to go see him or her, and so that he can discern, because a psychiatrist that isn't a believer, that does not believe, is going to think that anything like what you've said is a mental disorder. But a Catholic psychiatrist is going to be able to discern what belongs in the realm of the physical and the mental illness, and what belongs in the realm of spiritual disorder, you know, like possession in this case. So I was like, okay, he gave me the list, and I left, and I was absolutely devastated. And I was devastated, why? Because I thought that he had seen it and not wanted to take it out, you know, and I was devastated because I couldn't bear the thought of it just still being inside of me, and therefore arriving to my house and doing my stuff, and then suddenly realizing it's back with full power. And I was not. I mean, I had already been like not eating for, at this point, 2 days, not sleeping for almost like a night and a half. So my state of mind, you know, in my body, I was exhausted. I was just completely exhausted. I couldn't think of like coming home and having to battle once more, you know, to have this gone. So I was like super stressed. But I got home and I slept. I ate first, and I ate and I slept. And then I woke up the following day, and it was not there. It was gone. All the panic, all the fear, everything just was gone. And I was like, oh, it did come out in the toilet. I mean, now with the knowledge I have, I go back and I look at it, and of course it did come out. You know, it hurts when they come out. So it did, you know, like it had come out. So I was like, oh, I was so happy and grateful, and I couldn't. It had been a nightmare, you know. So it's almost like when the sun is shining after it's been raining for the entire winter, you know. Like it was just so good, and I kept on praying for my father. You know, I kept on praying for my father, and at this point, I felt that I needed to keep on going to mass, so I did. And then I realized that, yes, the big monkey had come out, but there were others. And there were others there because they were not as powerful as this one, because they could not interfere with my normal thought process. but they could get in between my decisions. Whenever I had difficult decisions to make, or even small ones to make, I had a lot of trouble like visualizing what was the answer that I needed to arrive to, what was the path that I needed to take, what was the really difficult time at making decisions. It was very uncomfortable. And also the pain had gone smaller, but it was still chewing on my liver whenever I would do things that it did not like. So I was like, okay, this is not fully gone, like, or if there are entities, of course, if it's a demon, well, then the big one came out, but there are small ones there because I don't feel like I am normal still. And so my aunt Patty had been talking to me a little bit just because of something else, like nobody knew what was happening. About the last apparition that Virgin Mary had in a place called Medjugorje in Bosnia. And so I started looking it up, because I wanted to check it. And I'm a very curious person, and I wanted to check this out. And I went on YouTube and I got this video, on the list, there was this video of a nun called Sor Emanuel, which is actually one of the people that runs this place in Bosnia, and from the community of Beatitudes, and there was a video of her explaining why she had become a nun, and I was like, oh, must be interesting. I want to see it, and I started watching it, and she's talking about this, that when she was very young, she had gone to, I don't know how you call it in English, like a wizard, like a brujo, like a well, but you get the gist, right? That was going to that she had gone to this man so that he could do like a full prediction of her life, and she was a very, very smart, very witty, very energetic, positive, and happy person, like happy young woman. And she went and did this, and then a week later she had completely changed. Like, she was super depressed, she didn't want to get out of bed, she was having suicidal thoughts, and she wanted to die. She wanted to kill herself. And she didn't know, of course, why this was happening. It was just that's what was happening. And the thing was that she wasn't much of a believer, but her sister was. So her sister took a priest to see her, and this priest did liberation prayer for her, and she got liberated. Like the spirit that was inside of her that entered her through the reading came out, and she went back to being the normal person she was. And this was such a extraordinary experience for her that she decided right there and then that she was going to devote her life to Christ, and that she was going to become a nun. And while she's saying all of this, I'm like, that's what I need to do. I need to go and get a priest to do a liberation prayer for me, and then we're gonna be done and set, and this thing is gonna come out, and I'm gonna be back to normal, and everything's gonna be good. So I did. I started researching on the liberation prayers and stuff, and I asked a priest here from the Jesuits, and he said to me that he couldn't do it because he didn't have the charisma to do it, and that I needed to go to the charismatics, that this is a branch of the Catholic Church that in 1970 something, I think, in a university in the United States, they had an experience like Pentecostes, and they received the Holy Spirit and they speak in tongues when they're praying. And I was like, okay, so I just grabbed the computer and I started looking on the web where I could find these people here, like in my region. And there's a phone number. I called and I talked to Ruben, and he was like, oh, you're so lucky, because in 5 more minutes we're gonna have a meeting, like all of us from the whole region, so I will definitely get you a priest to do this for you. To cut the story short, I went to see the priest, and the priest did the liberation prayer for me, and he was like reading from a text, and in the middle he did the exorcism from Archangel Saint Michael. and which I've been doing every day. And then in the middle, he starts doing something that I had no idea what he was doing, because I didn't know that was what he was doing. I found out way later about this whole speaking in tongue things, but I started listening to this like angelic kind of like singing. I call it the shibidi because that's the way it sounded to me, like shibidi. And I didn't know what was happening, but the bug did, and it did not like it, because when they speak in tongues, it's the Holy Spirit that is actually speaking through them. So when he started doing this thing, imagine my hands, like with spikes from like roses, imagine, and it was almost like these hands were just squeezing my liver with these things in it, and it was just so painful, and my legs started shaking, and my arms, started going really stiff, and it was really painful and very draining. Like I lost almost all my energy for the day in that experience. And so he finished the prayer. Him and I, we both knew that it had not come out. So he told me that the following week there was going to be a visit from a Colombian priest that was coming over to town, and that he was going to be performing healing masses, and that he was very proficient in what he did. So he invited me to go, and of course I did. So I went there to the first one, and if you guys don't know what a healing mass is a mass where there's a special blessing done, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in Spanish, or in English in your case, for the sacramentals, which are oil, salt, and water. So they become exorcised water, exorcised oil, and exorcised salt. And then after the Mass, there is an imposition of hands, either in your forehead or however the priest feels like doing it. And certain things happen depending on what state you're in. So I just went, and when the priest gave me the blessing, he just put his hands on my head, and I fell onto the ground in what I found out later that they called the rest of the spirit. So I was there. I was not like passed out, like I was fully aware and conscious of where I was and what was happening. I just couldn't control it. And I was just I was crying, and I started crying, but crying like the sorrows of humanity. Like it just felt like it was the entire universe I was crying for, because it was just, it was such a deep sadness that I don't think I've ever felt that sad. And then I just stood up and I kept on crying on the bench, and like at the end of this, like there was a little pond of my tears, in between my 2 feet, I just cried so much, and then I realized it was the pain of my soul. It wasn't the pain of the whole universe, it was just my soul, but it was a lot of pain. And I just cried and I cried and I cried. And then of course he was going to be in Chile for 1 week, and he was going to be doing retreats in Santiago, and also different healing masses here in the region. So I was like, of course I'm gonna follow him. So I went to the second one, and nothing happened to me. I just felt really good, very at peace, and it was super beautiful, very nice. And then the third Mass came, and in the third Mass, what happened was that first, it was a very particular Mass. It was very beautiful because the first hour, it was confession. So there were 4 priests confessing everyone that was there. It was like about 150 people. And then there was going to be 1 hour of adoration of the Holy Sacrament of the altar. Like when you have the Eucharist that is like this big, and this is like this big, and it's exposed. So there was an hour of that, and then the Mass was going to be with the Holy Sacrament exposed, which I've rarely ever seen, that happen. And so on confession time, I had a list, of things that I needed to confess. that I wanted to get out of my system and reconcile, I learned then that that's the reason why you confess, not because you want to feel that you're light, like your soul is lighter. It's because you want to reconcile with God. This is how lost I was when it comes to like a Catholic religion. And I see this priest, and I go towards them, and there's a lady in front of me on the line, and then when she's done, I walk towards him to kneel, because he's sitting on a chair, and there's those kneeling things so that you could confess. And at the moment he looked at me, approach him, he almost like, he looked at me, he kind of like sat straight, and I felt, again, I felt and I saw, not with my eyes, but with my heart, that he had put himself in defense mechanism, almost, like not defense against me, of course, but against the bugs I was carrying, because he almost like made a really like a big circle, not circle, sphere, a big sphere of light around him when he kind of like got up. And I looked at him, and I was like, and I thought to myself, he is the only priest I have seen from all the priests that I had been talking to, and encountering, that has seen what I know I have. So I was like, okay, this is really good, and I started confessing, and it was one of the best confessions I've ever had, and it was really, really, really intense. I cried a lot, and it was finished and done, and I went outside, and I just kept on crying for a really, really, really long time. And then I came inside, and people were doing the worship, and then the mass started. And at the end of the mass, I had decided that I was going to receive the blessing from the priest that had confessed me, that I had done the confession with, because he saw what I had. And plus, I had 2 masses with the Colombian priest, so it was okay. I had already received the blessing, So I went to this priest, and I did the line to receive the blessing from him, although it's from the Holy Spirit through that person. It's not like a particular priest. It would have happened with the other one anyway, but I wanted to go, and I wanted to go with him. And I did, and he placed his hands on my head, and he said 2 things. He said, leave her alone, come out of her. And that was the only 2 things that he was able to say, because I just dropped on the ground. And I started to have what could only be described as an epileptic attack. Seriously, like my legs were doing this on the ground, and my arms were just like twisting and being really tense, and it was a disaster for me, Well, it was really good, but at this moment, I was aware of everything that was happening. I couldn't control it. It was just happening. I was in pain. It was not comfortable. It was not, it had to happen. And then at this point, I didn't notice, because my eyes were closed, that a lot of people had gathered around me to impose their hands and pray for me. So one of these ladies placed her hands on my forehead and did this motion so that my neck would like go back. And when she did that, there was this scream that came out of me, but it wasn't like a horror scream. It was almost like it was just pain, there's a specific word for this in Spanish, but I'm not sure if there's an equivalent in English, because it's not screaming, it's like howling. Well, I don't know, but it was like pain, it was just a scream of pain that came out of my mouth. And when that happened, in like 1.2 seconds, the Colombian priest was kneeling down and talking to my ear, and immediately he asked me, have you ever been involved in anything that has anything to do with witchcraft? And I'm like, yes. Have you ever been involved in anything that has to do with Reiki, with any type of energetic medicine? And you're, yes. With any kind of alternative medicine? And you're, yes. come on, like 18 years of all of the stuff that you can possibly imagine, ranging from yoga to you name it, like just let's go. And he's like, okay, I need to know if you have received a lot of Reiki or if you've given a lot of Reiki. And I'm like, I have given a lot of Reiki. And he's like, okay. And he must have grabbed, because then again, I'm like, my eyes were closed. He must have grabbed a sponge, like full with the exercise water that they have just done previously, and place it right on my hands, both my hands, and I felt relieved. And then he said, okay, now repeat after me. I was like, okay. I resign to Reiki and all its practices, I resign to yoga, and I resign to alternative, and then on and on and on and on. And I was just repeating after him. And then there was this moment when he said to me, well, all of this, I was saying all of this, but my body was going bonkers, like my legs were just like all over the place. So were my arms. People were like trying to keep me in the place where I was. And then he says to me, okay, now I need you to repeat, Jesus is my Savior. And when I heard that, it's difficult to describe it. When I heard that, it was almost like my soul was having a party. Like it was almost like it was saying, oh, finally, thank you, like this is the balm I have been waiting for my entire life. But I couldn't say it. I couldn't say it because when I was going to say it, I felt almost like this hand or force, whatever, that was on my throat, and I couldn't speak, So when this happened, I have no idea. At that moment, I had no idea how the priest knew what to do, where to put the water. But I was going to say this, and then I felt this pressure over here, and he grabbed the same sponge, I guess, that he was using with the exorcised water and placed it above my throat, and it went away, and I could say it. Actually, I screamed it. My mother then explained later on, because she's been present for the 2 exorcisms that I've had so far. And after the first one, she told me, this is gonna sound very weird, but it moves. Like, what moves? The demon you have inside, it moves. Like when the priest is doing the exorcism, it's running away from it. So it circles your body. And she was like, look, the best way that I have to explain this to you is like a pregnant woman, when the baby moves, or you see its little feet, or the hand, you can see it moving through the body, right? And I was like, yeah. So well, it's the same thing, like I saw it go through you, like it was moving around. And I was like, oh, that's how the priest knew, like he must have seen this pressure that I felt on my throat. He must have seen it, like lift up or whatever. I haven't seen it, but he definitely saw it. And then it made sense, like how he would know exactly where to put the water, the exercise water, So at this point, I'm ready for the oven, because they've been putting like exercise water and the salt and the oil. I'm like, yeah. Just so where's the oven? We're having a barbecue or whatever. And and when I finally said it, Jesus is my Savior, everything started to like slowly coming down. Like my legs were still shaking, but they were shaking less rapidly, and everything was just like calming down. And then he grabbed my hands, he pulled me up, and he looked at me very seriously and very close, and he was like, you need to go see an exorcist, because what you have will not come out here. And I was like, okay, yes, no, I went to see an exorcist, and he said to me that I needed to go to a psychiatrist first. And he looked at me again very seriously, and he's like, you do everything he says. And I was like, okay, obedience, I get it. Right, I'll go, I will go. And another thing, I need you to bring Father Roberto, he pointed out the man that I had the confession with. I need you to bring him every single thing that you used to use to do all your practices. Like, my house was emptied. Like, I took him all the stones, all the pendulums, all of the flower back remedies, all of the essential oils, all of the everything that was ever related with my yoga mat, like just everything. Just I took everything to him, and I felt a lot of relief in the house. I must say, I burned like 60 books. Because I had a lot of books that came from my grandfather, and this is like the basis of a lot of the reason why I was involved in so many practices, like from shamanism to different kind of like ceremonies, like with the spirits of fire and the four elements, and native stuff, and metaphysics, and all kinds of like alternative medicine. It was because I grew up with my grandfather being a metaphysical person, like he was part of the White Brotherhood, and he was quite high on rank, like people will come to his place to hear him speak and stuff like that. And so he trained me quite well, actually. When I remember the first book he ever gave me was when I was like 7 years old, and then onwards, like he kept on giving me books to read and to debate with him and study. And when I was 12, he gave me this big collection of 30 books called Keys for a New Humanity. And in every single one of those books, it was like just filled with all of the possible knowledge of all of the disciplines there exist in the world, like from Buddhism to Sufism, just going through all the physical therapy, spiritual therapy, everything. It was just crowded, filled with it. So he gave me a lot of books, and I had most of his collection of books after he died. And I hadn't noticed that on the first, I had read it, of course, a million times, but I've never noticed what it was really in reality. And then going through this experience, I realized like all those books were cursed, because he had a curse written on it that said, this book belongs to the circle of magic, cursed whomever keeps it without being in the family. And well, anyway, I didn't believe in those things, but yeah, I burned the books and the house feels a lot happier now. So I gave all of this away, and to the priest and to the fire. What happened next is that I went to see the psychiatrist, and it was amazing because I went in, we talked for an hour and a half. He was very smart, incredibly clever, had a board that he was writing on, doing almost like a synoptic map of my 3 episodes and everything that had happened, and he asked me a whole bunch of questions, and it was all super good. And then at the end of the hour and a half, he says, okay, I need you to go outside for about 10 minutes so that I can make like a mental summary of all of this, and then I'll call you back in. So I went outside, and then I came back in, and he looked at me, and he asked me 2 things more. Might have said another thing or 2. And then he looked at me and said, out of all of the people that Padre Luis has ever sent me, you are the first person that I doubt, because you don't need to see me. You need to see him. So, and this is so much like this, he said, that as soon as you leave, I'm going to grab the phone and I'm going to call him so that he can give you an appointment. And I was like, yes! I felt like I'd won, like I was so happy, because that meant validation. It meant that I could tell my family and not have to go to the hospital, like it meant that someone, a professional and a doctor, was telling me that what I had felt and what I have been experiencing for all of this month was true, and that the answer was not in my brain, and that I didn't have a mental illness, but I had a spiritual illness, which is far worse, actually. When you think about it, because the body is gonna die no matter what. It's my soul that is gonna, it's our souls that are going to continue, but my illness belonged to my soul, and it had the reasons why it had entered were clear and evident for me, because now I know that, I mean, a demon is not gonna go inside you just because, you know, like it has to have permission. Whether you are aware of it or not, we do give permission, and this is the important part of this video. We do give permission for demons to come in without knowing what we're doing. One way demons can come in is through rape. Another way demons can come in is through abortion. Another way demons can come in, and this one I never understood, but now I do, is having sex without being married. And the reason why is because this is like AIDS, you know, like it's just transfers from one person to another. And when the sacrament of marriage, I'm talking Catholic Church, the sacrament, what it does is, it's almost like, the best way that I have to explain it is, it's like a spiritual condom, you know. It doesn't allow for whatever spirits the woman has to go to the man, and vice versa. So it protects the union, it sanctifies it, it makes it holy. And of course I didn't know that. And the other way that demons can come in is by the practice of all alternative medicines. And this is something that it may take a little bit to explain, and I hope not too much, because I don't want to make this video a very long video, but it's preferably to say it all in one video than to have more than one done. You can pause it and continue later if it's too long. But the thing here is that with all of these infused knowledge that I've been acquiring almost through the exorcisms and through the experience that I've just told you, is almost like the narrative of creation. And in a way that that makes sense, even like when you take it to quantum physics, you know, God is not a particular entity or anything like that, you know, like it's not that old beard, old guy, you know, with a beard that is looking and watching out over us. What it is that he's the primordial light. It's the brightest thing that you could ever imagine. Like, there isn't anything as bright as he is. And what's the important part of that is that when we die, there is something like the judgment. Every time we go over God's law, like let's say lying or not being kind to the person that you have right next to you, or whatever, you name it, what actually happens in the soul is that we have an amount of light, and when we do those things, that amount of light comes out of us. Not the entire amount of light, but a tiny little bit of light, depending on what you're doing, it's lost. Okay? So why the sacrament of confession is so important in the tradition, and it's because the Holy Spirit restores the amount of light you lose every time you go over God's law, right? So when the priest actually puts his hand over your head, what it's doing, not him, of course, the Holy Spirit is going through him so that it can restore the amount of light you lost because you, I don't know, said a lie or, I don't know, cheated or whatever. So what's the point with this? The point with this is that when our soul exits our body, it needs a specific amount of light in order to face the primordial light. And why? Because it's so bright, it's so incomprehensible, that if we don't have the right amount of light, which is very specific, is almost mathematical, if we don't have that amount of light to face him, we will panic. And we will panic why? Because we will feel like we're burning. And the idea of meeting the primordial light is that you embrace it, and then you go back home, you go back to God, right? Now the problem is that if you don't have that amount of light in you, in your soul, when your soul comes out of your body, you will face him, the brightest light in the universe. You'll not have the amount of light you need, and you'll feel frightened. You will panic, and when you panic, you will run away. And when you run away, where can you hide from the light? In darkness. And the problem is that the soul doesn't think about this, because it's not thinking. It's just the only thing that it can do. It needs to escape. When we go and hide in the darkness, we can't get out. So what is the problem with alternative medicines? The problem with alternative medicines is that this is a bit longer. Okay. Heaven, Garden of Eden, and Earth. These are metaphors for places that are not in the same time-space frame. Okay? So God is the brightest light, meaning if you take that into vibration, he'll be the highest note. Therefore, if it's like a ah, we would need to have that same tone in order to be in the same time space he is, right? Okay, now think about cancer. Cancer happens because one cell refuses to die. So one cell does not want to die and reverse the whole biological process and start contaging all of the other cells. They become necrotic, and then you have cancer, right? So think about the creation. God created first not angels, well, we call them angels, and they're anthropomorphized by us, but it's actually virtues. So it's love, compassion, wisdom, you know, like all of these many virtues. And what happened was that one of these virtues, which was called Samael, which meant the beloved one, you know, because he was the only one that could be so close to God, he felt that he was so much like God that he wanted to be God and actually wanted to replace God. So he was disobedient, just like a cell, you know, that doesn't want to die is disobedient to the biology of it, right? So same thing happens. He necrotized the cells that were around him like a mutiny, and all of them, it's said in the tradition, that were cast out of heaven, right, by Saint Archangel Saint Michael, you know, of this space or time and space where God was living with the virtues. What happens is that since God was the highest note, what happened with these virtues is that instead of being like, because they started having these thoughts of, we could be like God, you know, like we don't need God, we could replace him, they went from to so they fell. That's why it's called the fallen angel and the fallen angels, you know, like in plural, because it was 1/3 of all of the virtues that were created. So they fell. And now where did they fall? They fell here. They fell on earth. And the thing that happened with that is that the Garden of Eden was in a different place, a little bit lower, you know. It wasn't just so high, it was a little bit lower. And what happened there is that we were created as humans, you know, as species. And what happened there is that Satan, because then his name changed to the traitor or the liar, you know, from being the loved one to the liar, he realized that the only way that he could get back at God was to steal souls from him. Specifically human souls, of course, because we were like the dearest of creation. And he does this by tempting. That story, we know it's a metaphor, of course. But what happens with us is exactly the same. We were vibrating on a certain level, And because we allowed a certain kind of evil to go in, which is the knowledge of good and evil, we descended. We fell. We also fell. And where did we feel? Where did we fall? We fell to earth. But now, what the problem is with this is that the first knowledge, all of the primordial, primigenio, first encounter knowledge of us humans was given to us by whom? By the fallen angels, which, by the way, are still angels, so they can show themselves as very positive, very beautiful, very angelic creatures. I mean, when I was doing Reiki, I felt like an angel was actually guiding me, telling me where I needed to put my hand, how to take out where I needed to take out. I mean, I felt in heaven, but I wasn't, So this is the way Satan has to seduce, giving you power, like making you hear things and have visions of things and like know what other people are thinking, or being very perceptive, and all of these are hooks for you to get hooked on whatever practice you're doing. It gives you power. It gives you a lot of power, and a lot of people love it because of the same. And a lot of people like me and most of my friends, we have done it, and we have practiced all of this because we thought it was good. Because we thought it was good for us, because we thought it was good for our families and for our friends, and because we wanted to spread it out. Because we've been deceived. That's the way he works. Nobody's gonna partner with a demon knowing it's a demon. You partner with things that it makes you think they're good when they're bad. And why am I saying this? The reason why I'm saying this is because we got our first knowledge from demons. So when you look at the indigenous tribes, most of them, I'm not saying all, but a lot of them have either a snake or a dragon or a carnero, which I don't know what the translation for it in English is, in their basic story of how the world was made. Tren Tren in Kai Kai from the Mapuche people here in Chile is two snakes that fight off and create the universe in their fighting. The Aztecs and Mayans, with Quetzalcoatl and Quetzalcoatl, which is, I think that's how you pronounce it. Same thing, snakes and snake. There's a snake there too, and all the dragons in China, and La Tirana, and it's just everywhere. It's everywhere. So what the problem with that is that nobody is going to tell you, because it's not open knowledge, that every single one of the alternative medicines that are around, and everything that has to do with magic and oracles and Ouija and Ouija board, like all of these things, and they're all connected to, they have one fallen angel that rules them. There's one for Reiki, there's one for whatever discipline you want to call, for yoga, there's one for everyone. Every single one of the therapies and the knowledge that we have had in that aspect, like of healing ourselves. And why? Because I have a problem in the liver, and I am gonna take a few drops of, let's say, back remedies or whatever, to heal it, to heal it, to heal my anger so that it won't affect my liver. And the problem with that, like with traditional Chinese medicine and all of this, is that since it has one fallen angel governing it, that fallen angel will never tell you what transaction he's actually doing in order to get you well. To get you well, as in well-being. And the thing is, you go and you say, okay, I'm gonna have some sessions of Reiki or acupuncture to heal my liver. And he'll be like, you want to heal your liver? Yes, of course, I will heal your liver. And the price will be a part of the light of your soul. So what we don't know is that every time we're doing this, that fallen angel is actually taking, that spirit, is taking light out of your soul to heal your body, which is gonna die anyway. but it's taking something immortal that you desperately need by the time you leave your body, and is using it to heal your body. And that's why it's so quick. Because one of the characteristics and the appeals, like it wants to seduce, of course, the appeals of all of these traditional, well, not traditional, but this alternative medicines is that they work very fast. You can see improvement quite quickly. You feel better, you have more energy, you have more disposition to do things, and people love it and they get hooked because of it. But of course it will heal you fast if they're using the light of your soul to do so. Like, how is it not? It would be very, very, very difficult to not be healed like almost instantly if it's the light of your soul that has been used for it. So what's the problem with all of this? That if you've done a lot of this, and if you practice a lot of this, what you're actually doing is depleting your soul from the light it will need by the time it leaves the body. So whenever you die, your soul will not have the amount of light it needs to face the primordial light. And then what will happen? We will be super frightened and we will go to the darkness. And the problem there is that once you get in, the door gets locked and you can't get out. So I wanted to share this message and this information because I have devoted the past 18 years of my life to all the possible therapies, healing therapies that you can possibly imagine from all corners of the world, thinking I was doing the right thing. And I wasn't. I am absolutely infected. I have 2 exorcisms, full exorcisms on me yet, and they're still not out. And I don't know how many of them are there, and they're still left. And you can't tell. It doesn't show from outside, because this is an interesting thing with spirits, in the spiritual world, is that not even God messes around with our free will. A demon will not either, because they don't have the power to do so. Therefore, I may be infected, with I don't know how many demons, but I will never go and kill someone because my nature is different. But maybe the demons that I have go into a violent person, maybe that person would kill someone, yes. But it's not something like you can see, like if my dad does not go up into the mountain in this really obscure and very strange and scary cult, I would have never guessed that this is what was happening to me. I had been diagnosed, I've been taking lithium for 4 years now, so I would have never guessed that I had demons inside, It took an extreme experience, the love of God, and the willingness to pray like a mad person to realize that something was wrong with me. If I hadn't done any of those things, I would still be in the exact same place, and probably I would be promoting all of the stuff that I'm not promoting right now. So I thought that was an information that it was important to share. And I hope that this is it's useful for all of us. And if you have any questions, you can leave them here, and I'll be happy to answer and to explain anything or any doubts that you might have. I have a lot of information that I can't share in this video because it's 1 hour and 29 minutes already, and it's too long. It's like a movie, and it's just me. And so I think it's too long. But if you have any questions on anything else, I'll be happy to answer. Okay? I love you. Bye.